Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the I See Old People podcast. Today is December 12th, 2024, and I am Dr. Bruce, your host. Welcome to the show. Today I'm just going to be doing some random conversations with you. I wanted to talk about a couple of things that are going on, a couple of revelations that I had. One of the things doing this podcast today is because it's really cold out. In Norfolk County here, it's minus 10 today, which is very cold. That's minus 10 Celsius. So that's 14 Fahrenheit for my listeners in the States. So it's pretty cold. And there's a ferocious wind out there. So very, very cold. When I went to take the dog for a walk this morning, I was in my full parka with the hood up. It was windy and it was cold. We have a recycling program here in our town where people put recyclable items out in a blue bin. Sometimes it's a black bin, but out in a plastic bin out in the front, and it gets picked up on garbage day. And it goes to a recycling facility. Well, that recycling was all over the street today. I went out and cleaned up in front of my own home, and then I went over to my neighbors, and I filled a whole recycling can with just stuff that was floating down the street in the wind. And I saw the funniest thing when it was a really, really strong wind, and it was a recycling box that was empty. It must have had a little bit of ice underneath it, and the wind caught it, and it just went flying down the road. And it was very funny. It was going as fast as a car. It was really neat. So I got thinking about my age now at 65, and my father would be 99 years old this year if he was still alive, but he died when he was 72. And before that, his mother, she died at 67, but she was born in 1900, so she died in 1967. And I think about my grandmother, who I only knew for a few years. I only knew her for 6 years. I only had two grandmothers. Well, everyone only has two grandmothers, but I had two grandmothers for a few short years, 6 years with one and 8 years with the other. And I never had a grandfather. Both of them had passed away before I was born. So being a grandfather is new to me, and it's the best time of my life. It's incredible, but I didn't have a role model. So I'm just kind of doing it what feels right, what feels with love, what feels positive, what feels good, and how to make a loving family and be a loving person. That's all I can really go by, because I didn't have a role model as a grandfather. And actually my children's grandparents, both of their grandfathers and grandmothers were in a different town. So they didn't have that as well. They got to visit them, and they got a lot of love from them, but they never were here. They never were part of life the way I am part of life with my grandchildren, taking them to hockey games and practices and picking them up after school. And, my father never got to do that. And my grandfather never even met me. So I was just a twinkle in his eye when he passed away at 53. So I got thinking about the big changes that go on with someone like my grandmother. Okay, like when she was born, there were no planes. By the time she died in 67, international plane travel was common. There were jetliners that went across the Atlantic and the Pacific, and people flew to Hawaii, and people flew to Europe and China, and it was just a whole different world. She saw this incredible transformation in her life. And my father, he didn't really see a big transformation. Maybe we went to space, planes got bigger and faster, and he saw technological changes in his life. He saw a lot of changes. Computers came in near the end of his life, so he never took up computers. He never knew much about computers, but he saw a lot of changes. Nothing as quite dramatic as I think as flight, air travel. But what was the big thing that happened with us? We could say, the computer. I don't think it was the biggest thing. I think when the computer was introduced, it really made things a lot more efficient, and things worked so much better, faster, quicker, more accurate. So all kinds of improvements in things. But I think what really changed society, is equal to the way the jet or the airplane changed society. I really think it was the introduction of the cell phone that was a computer, the smartphone. in a few short years, the smartphone pretty much destroyed the family unit and the idea of a family unit, the way we all grew up knowing what a family unit was. And the reason I say this is, when I was growing up, I mean, I'm so old that, we had a party line, which means more than one person shared the telephone. The people across the street shared the same phone with us, same phone line, because there were so few phone lines, and they had a different ring than we had. So when it rang a funny ring, it was theirs. When it rang a certain way, it was ours. That was only when I was really young. And then we got our own line and then kept the same phone number in our house on the wall with that phone for the next 45 years. That phone number is embedded in my brain. But the thing is that phone number connected by a line to a house was on the wall of a house, and you weren't just calling a person at that time. You were calling a family. You were calling a home. So your home was calling someone else's home, and that required some skills that people today don't have. For example, when I was a 15-year-old and I wanted to talk to a girl I met at school and I wanted to call her house, I had to have all kinds of skills. Perhaps her father answers the phone. I have to introduce myself. I have to say who I am. I want to say, I want to talk to your daughter. What if her old feeble grandmother answered the phone and she couldn't hear me well and she didn't know what I was talking about? I'd have to explain myself, who I was and why I wanted to talk to her granddaughter. What if it was her 3-year-old brother who answered the phone and he's just babbling on? Well, you've got a skill set there too. Oh, this is Bobby. Please, I want to talk to your sister. Could you go find her? Could you bring her to the phone? Those are skills that people don't have today, because you didn't call a person, you called a home, and at that home, that the people in that home, you found that person and then you connected on your line. That's gone now. That's just gone. It's completely gone. Families don't call families. Homes don't call homes. People call people. People call people directly. I have 6 people in my house. 6 of them have a phone in their pocket with 6 phone numbers. Nobody calls this house. In fact, we haven't had a landline in this house now for 10 years. The calls are direct. They come to the person. It's person to person. In just a few short years, the idea of family and the idea of the family home is just decimated. It's gone. And now it's all individual, and those skills that were required, they're all gone. Now a 15-year-old boy, he has no phone skills. He has no ability to get his idea across on a phone on what he needs to do, because there's no challenge. All he needs to do is text. So he texts that 15-year-old girl that he met at school, and he says, "Zup," and that's it. That's his skill level. A text to a girl. Didn't have to deal with their father, didn't have to deal with their grandmother, didn't have to deal with their 3-year-old little brother. All of a sudden, it's just 2 people directly connecting one-on-one, and the family is completely excluded. Also, the mobility of the phone. You're not calling the family home anymore. You're just calling that person wherever they are. They could be anywhere in the world. That phone will ring in their pocket. So the family just disappeared. It's just gone. And I think in the big scheme of things, it's not good. It's not good. I'm not happy with that change. I don't think it's for the best. And now we just see people completely glued to their phones. I remember when I started out in healthcare, one of the office expenses was magazine subscriptions. I would have 5 or 6 magazine subscriptions, always current, and I paid that money out so that my clients could read in my reception area. You never see that anymore. That's not an office expense anymore. People have cleared out the magazines from their waiting rooms. People sit in there in the waiting rooms and they look at their phones. So much has changed. So much. So I think that unless things change more, unless there's an alien invasion or something that really rocks the world, I would say that this is the biggest change that has affected our society. It's definitely affected our society. So I wanted to talk a little bit about being a healthcare entrepreneur, because that's what I have been. I graduated as a chiropractor in 1986. Actually, I graduated in 85. I started working as a chiropractor in 1986, and I practiced for 37 years. I had a very good practice. I practiced in 2 locations. I had a rental location for 10 years, and then I built my own building and created a health center. I did that in 1996, 10 years later. And that health center today is still a thriving, active health center, well used in the community, well respected building. I guess if a building can have respect, a very nice unit. It's always had good tenants. Of course, I'm not there anymore because I gave up my practice 4 years ago. I decided that I'd had enough, but I'd already branched into other fields. I had a history of entrepreneurship within healthcare. Way back, I had a little newsletter that I had advertising space in it and everything. It was called the Alternative News, and it talked about alternative health and about different ways to look at things. Some of my articles would have been about too many antibiotics in the food, the feed, that kind of thing. Different health things, the value of vitamin C, the value of vitamin D, and getting out in the sun. And then I rented a little bit of ad space in it to pay for it, and it was a going venture. It ran for about 3 years, and of course computers and killed that basically. The internet, people stopped reading these little newsletters to the degree that they used to. There are still some around that are very popular, like the coffee news is a big one. It's just a few articles and a few ads, and you kind of find it all over the place. That was my idea, to do that kind of thing, and it was successful for a couple of years, and we enjoyed doing it. Then I opened an X-ray company. I had a beautiful X-ray machine that was only being used within my practice. I was licensed to take X-rays within the province of Ontario, so I decided to open an X-ray company and take X-rays for other practitioners. And that worked out really, really well until my X-ray unit got too old. Regulations started to become to the point where the money I would have to put into it to keep it current would have been not worth it at all. So, but it was well used because I bought it used, and then I used it for a good 10 years, and then decided to sell it. And I ended up selling. I said, when I sold it, and I sold it at a very good resale price actually. I said, what are you going to do with it? Like, what happens with it? The broker who bought it from me, he says he'll sell it to a vet clinic. That's the way it works. So, unfortunately, the restrictions are not as strong or as intense with X-ray units for animals. Is the only thing I could suppose from that. The next thing I did, I started an orthotics business. A lot of chiropractors were selling orthotics. I didn't like the idea of having somebody come into me with a chiropractic problem and all of a sudden I'm selling them orthotics. I didn't like that idea, but I did like the idea of having a business stream, a working business stream. So my wife is a registered nurse, and she wasn't practicing at the time. The kids were getting a little bit older, so she trained to become an orthotic. To apply orthotics and examine people and do orthotic work. And so we opened Custom Orthotics and Footwear, and it ran as a subsidiary company within the Victoria Health Center. So that was all really, really good. But I guess the biggest change that I made that allowed me to retire 4 years ago was that I moved into the elder care business. I opened Victoria Elder Care, and I basically opened it from within my office, my chiropractic office, and I ran it there for about 4 years. And what it is an agency, and we put personal support workers into people's homes to help them with aging, help them with the activities of daily living, bathing, washing your teeth, cleaning your teeth, washing your face, your hair, toileting, eating, like all the different activities that sometimes it only takes 1 or 2 activities that kind of take you out. You lose the ability to do one thing of these activities of daily living, and your life becomes very difficult. So I saw that within my practice. I saw my aging clients, and they really didn't have any help, and they didn't have any support. So in 2009, I started researching this, and I developed the idea of Victoria Elder Care, and came up with a business plan, and then we launched in 2010. And it's been a very successful company. We have 35 personal support workers. They're busy all the time. We could take on more jobs if we had more workers, if we had more people to work, but it's hard to find good workers and it's hard to keep good workers. So I've seen a lot of changes in that industry. In 2010, 2009, when I was researching it, I basically had to tell people what home care was. They honestly didn't know what I meant by home care. They had no idea. Now, I mean, you talk about home care now in 2024, people know exactly what it is. People know exactly how important it is and why it's necessary and why companies are doing it. So it's really changed in 14 years, the way things are operating in home care. So it's been a wonderful business to be in. It's allowed me the freedom to quit my practice, which, practice is tough. You're there all the time. You're on a schedule. You're seeing patients all day long, and you're stuck there. Like, that's it. So I did it for 37 years, and I was happy. I was happy to stop. I loved it. I helped a lot of people over the years. I was really good. I was really good at what I did. I was an incredible adjuster. Like, I could really move the bone. It's my claim to fame. I could put a rib back in place. I had beautiful, accurate, fast adjusting that you just don't see as much anymore. I'm really old school. You see a lot of chiros today with gadgets and gizmos, and they're doing like glorified physiotherapy. I had a pure, straight practice. People came in and they got an adjustment and they left. And that was, it was beautiful. It was a beautiful time. But, after 37 years and COVID, I was done. I was done. And I'm glad I put it behind me, because the elder care business has been extremely busy, and it's been a whole new outlet for me, a whole new version for me. So, I started listening to some old podcasts, and I got to tell you, I sounded like a completely different person. I really have changed. I really have changed a lot in 5 years. I didn't think it would be so dramatic, but when you go back, I went back and listened to some podcasts from 2019, and my worldview was different. My voice tenor, the sound of my voice was different. Probably my hearing loss has changed my voice. I know I feel a little nasal I sound a little nasal right now, but that's because it's really cold out and the heat's going on in here, and it's dry, so my nose is dry, and even though I'm sipping water, it's a very dry environment. One of the biggest problems, one of the reasons people get so sick in Canada is that once they get stuck inside, the air is recirculated and it becomes very, very dry, and their throats become very dry, their noses become very dry. They start, runny noses and hacking and coughing. So much of it has to do with the weather. They always like to blame the bug, the little tiny bug, but I'll tell you, it's more the change in the weather and the darkness. Shortest day of the year is coming up soon. Next 10 days. 10 days will be the shortest day of the year, and then thank God they start getting longer again. So how has things changed for me in 5 years? I think, the biggest change that's positive is that I stopped drinking. Almost these entire 5 years, I haven't drank for 4.5 years, so over 4.5 years. But the negatives are there too. I've really become less trustful of people, really less trustful of the government. My security that, what is mine will stay mine. I think government overreach is becoming pandemic. Government overreach seems to be the key thing that's just driving me. And then, of course, a big change in my family with my son when he stopped talking to us and stopped being part of this family. I'm going to do a whole podcast on that, though. I have some really deep thoughts on that. I really give it a lot of thought. I give it way too much thought. That's the problem. There's no way of moving on. That's the thing. There's no way to go through the grieving processes. But I'm going to talk about that in another time when I can devote the whole podcast to that. I want to end on a really nice note. It was my birthday a couple weeks ago. I turned 65 on November 23rd, and I got this wonderful little card from my granddaughter and my grandson. Okay, so it's got questions and then answers. So, what's Grandpa's name? Bruce. How old is Grandpa? 63, although that's wrong. I was 65. What's Grandpa always say? Speak up. But I have my hearing aids now, so they won't hear speak up quite as much. Grandpa's favorite food is chocolate. They got that one right. Where is Grandpa's favorite place to go? The arena. I like that. That's great because they know how much I enjoy being at the arena with them. How tall is Grandpa? And the answer is just tall. What is Grandpa good at? Art. What is Grandpa not so good at? Baking. Well, and the reason I'm not so good at baking was the day that I used baking soda instead of flour in a cake, and it exploded in the oven. So that was a big mistake, and they'll never forget it. So what is Grandpa's job? Victoria Eldercare. If Grandpa were I'm sure my grandkids won't even remember that I was a chiropractor. I mean, that memory will fade of me ever having a practice, but they know me doing the home care work. If Grandpa were a cartoon character, he would be Bugs Bunny. How do you know Grandpa loves you? He gives me hugs. My message for Grandpa: I love you. My favorite thing to do with Grandpa is play games. The best thing about Grandpa is he comes to my hockey games. I think that's just wonderful. Brought a tear to my eye. And then inside the card is some really nice notes that they hand wrote instead of just answering questions. So that's a keeper. I'm going to keep that one forever. Well, if you listen to this point, wow, thank you. You know I love you, and I appreciate you. So I'm going to let you go. I don't know if I'll be talking to you before the new year. 2025 is coming up fast. It's a whole new world starting in 2025. Let's hope that the ugly past is gone. A bright future is ahead of us. I'm looking forward to the day that I can say, wow, things are really a lot better, and life is sure a lot better than it was back in the early 2020s. Okay, take care. I love you.